We got a bidet!
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are talking about the final film for the Skywalker saga, and that is Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. This movie definitely has had a lot of talk about it, especially with everything that happened with Episode 8. What did they have to do to potentially pick up the pieces or extend the story? Arguably some mishandling, but ultimately we got this movie in the 2 years that they promised us, and the rest is history. So kind of what we're going to talk about here in the first segment about Rise of Skywalker is, all three of us, Sarah, Austin, and myself, Austin is back, we all got to experience what it was like for when this movie was announced, when it was released, what was the buzz, what was the positives and the negatives, all that good stuff. I still remember watching the Star Wars Celebration where they revealed the trailer. The first trailer, JJ and all of them came out, and they showed the trailer, and at the very end, I think is when you hear the Emperor's voice, which, made everybody go crazy at Star Wars Celebration of wondering how in the world could he be back. And then Ian McDiarmid stepped out on stage and said, "Roll it again," in his little Emperor voice. And then they played it again. People got excited all over again. And then they closed it out. So I think arguably people were pretty excited about it. But I don't know if that's exactly what happened when the product came out. What do you guys remember about what was it like to be in anticipation for this movie? Were you even excited for it?
I was very excited for it. Um, I over the first two movies, the characters grew on me. Poe is pretty likable right away. Not really too much of an issue about him. But Finn and Rey especially really grew on me over the two movies. So I was excited to see the conclusion to the trilogy. And like you said, once the trailer came out, and I think it was just like the Emperor laughing maybe at the end of the trailer, and
Yeah.
that just started all this buzz. It was crazy how much um, talk there was right after that.
Yeah. Uh, I totally agree. Like, everybody was wondering, how in the world is this dude back? And then, just the opening crawl, somehow he has returned or whatever it was. And it's just like, what? And
Yeah,
then,
there's a broadcast going out to everybody.
which is kind of funny because do we all know where the broadcast actually happened in the human world? Like our world? Do you guys know?
I don't know where you're going with this.
There was a Fortnite event where they were promoting the Rise of Skywalker, and
Yep.
the broadcast was heard on Fortnite about the Emperor saying like the Resistance is dead and he's going to be coming back and stuff. And really, that was the only little notion that we got of how he was back. Even in the movie, they say somehow he's returned, and there's no explanation. Which people were asked, the actors, I think it was Ian McDiarmid when he was on a panel like the year after at Star Wars Celebration, and they were asked, what type of discussions were happening when they were determining how much to tell viewers about Palpatine's return. And one of the things that he had mentioned was that uh, having a little bit of information, and I'm paraphrasing here, having less information is better because people don't care. They just want to see the Emperor. And I was like, I don't know about that. I don't think that's how it went over.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I feel like I remember wanting his return to be more of like a flashback or something, or like somehow something from the past, not necessarily him returning into the world. Because when we saw him in the film for the first time, it was really weird to see him, and we were like, why is he back like this? Like, this doesn't make any sense. It was really strange.
And
Yeah, we
there,
get an early scene. What were you gonna say, Jeremy?
I was gonna say, we got little to no information about why he was there, how he got there. Um, but if you, I'm the one thing that a good handful of my friends don't like to hear about Star Wars is if you read the book, they tell you more. So it's kind of interesting because I think the Rise of Skywalker book came out like a few months later or something after the film. And I feel like the author, which kudos to them, the author took it upon themselves to put in some of the missing pieces of how this all worked. And so we do get some information there. The Emperor was somebody that always had a contingent plan or contingency plan, however you want to call it. So he had a backup to his backups to his backups, like forever and ever kind of a thing, because he just wanted to live forever and rule the galaxy. Well, one of the things is, if Vader were to betray him, how would he do it? And so he had like this facility, very, very small facility, as we saw on Exegol, where he had those Sith worshippers and basically had just like a body there for him to transport his being into right before his official death on the Death Star. That's essentially what it was. And then the body wasn't a very good copy, as we can see. He's like deteriorated and stuff. But it was something. It was a way for him to stick around.
Yeah. And I think even in the movie when the rebels find out about it, that it's real, they get the intel from their spies. Um, they are having their debriefing, and then they're all saying, how is this all possible? And I think the first person in the crowd to speak is says like cloning and something else. These are secrets only the Empire had. And we're starting to get some of those answers now in the new Disney Plus shows, which has been really cool to see. Just little breadcrumbs that they're dropping. Um, but yeah, at the time, I think a lot of people really struggled with it, but it's over time, I think it's not as big of a deal. It kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's more of like if you want to put in the effort to understand more of how it works, then you can sleep better at night. But if you don't, then people, at least from what I've seen from people, they tend to just shut down from it and then just say it was terrible, kind of a thing. See what other things were pretty big around here. Uh,
The Dark Side Ray, right? That was in the
yeah,
trailer. We had no
yes,
idea what that was.
that was a huge, like, in my opinion, I think that was bigger than the Emperor for me because it was like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen here? And I mean, we all know it was like 2 seconds of the movie that really didn't pan out.
Yeah,
She had like a cool new lightsaber too.
yeah. That's
There was so much hope for something there, you know?
yeah, definitely. Those are like I think in my memory the three big takeaways from the trailer were the Emperor at the very end, that scene with the dark side Ray, and then when she does the backflip with the cutting the TIE fighter. Like those are like the three big moments from the trailer for me.
And also going along with that part in the trailer, we see that the lightsaber is reforged, like the Skywalker saber that broke in The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
So that mystery too, which we really didn't get any closure about, just the fact that it was there and it was repaired. Um, I guess somehow, I think the explanation that I read in some books is that basically healed the lightsaber with the Force and reforged it,
Okay.
whatever that means.
I'll take that answer because it would have been really hard to find some replacement parts, I think.
Yeah, or just a welder.
It's just an old, really old piece of technology there.
Yeah, trying to think. I think there's got to have been more stuff that was happening around that. I just know going into the movie, I was like, I know where we left off. I'm just gonna try to be open minded going into
Yeah.
the movie and see what happens. Um, I do think there was a lot of cool things. Like, so what went down with Star Wars or Disney handling Star Wars was that J.J. Abrams did episode 7, and then the plan was that Ryan Johnson was going to do 8 and Colin Trevorrow was going to do 9. Well, Disney had some disagreements with Trevorrow and then had him leave the project. And so they had to fill this void, and somehow they paid JJ enough to come back. And even though that guy 100% in my mind had the right to say no for what they did to his project in episode 8, that's beside the point. He had to come back and like pick up all these pieces and you know he used a lot of stuff from like concept art from The Force Awakens. If you've ever seen the art book, there's a art book that comes out after these movies that's like a couple months after they release, and they kind of show you all the concept art from the film. If you look at the one from The Force Awakens, the cover of it is actually the inspiration for the shooting of when Kylo approaches the big fortress thing on Exegol. So like when he's walking towards it, that's from the Force Awakens concept art. So he used a lot of things that he had left over from the Force Awakens for this project. So it's kind of cool if you like know those little behind the scenes things that you can enhance uh, what is going on with the film, but not everybody is that super nerdy, I don't think. It's kind of like an Easter egg for those that like behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'm sure there was a bunch of stuff for this movie that the average viewer probably wouldn't pick up on, but I know there's a lot there.
One thing that I'd like to bring up is merch. So, specifically, there is at least one Star Wars Black Series action figure, Zori, who this movie came out in 2019, and she still has so many of her action figures on the shelves today, almost 4 years after the release of that film.
Yeah, our department store just down the street from us still has like 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah, talk
And they
about
won't go on
like
clearance.
underutilizing a really cool character.
Yeah.
It
Yeah, her
kind of goes
costume design and stuff was really neat.
yeah. It kind of goes back to like when they were first like when Force Awakens was coming out and they were doing a lot of their merch for that right when it came out. A lot of the Black Series figures that we collect that came out initially for that release were a bunch of characters that looked cool and unique, but they really had no significance in the movies. And I think that's kind of what happened with Zori. Like, yes, she plays a part in it, and she probably has maybe 10 minutes of screen time, but we didn't get enough to actually, I think, care about her. And we haven't got anything that has expanded on her character at all, as far as like, I mean, animated shows, shorts, anything. And
Yeah,
so it's harder to, in my opinion, sell those figures when nobody cares.
yeah. It almost feels like they were trying to get lucky with like another Boba Fett situation where even with very few scenes, the character has like such a reputation and this aura about them. Um, but I didn't get the same. Yeah, I didn't get the same feeling from Zori, and I think that's how a lot of people felt. Is that yeah, this is kind of a cool character, but we don't really know anything about them, nor do we really get to see them in action doing their thing. So
Unless you read the book.
unless you read the book.
Because I will say in the book, it does, because I think in the movie, the First Order or the Final Order explodes Kajimi, like shoots the weapon in and destroys it. In
Hmm.
the book, it actually goes through what she did to get off the planet.
Mhm.
Okay.
Because, that's why Poe was surprised that she was there at the end, because he thought, oh, how'd you get off the planet?
Yeah, and Babu Frick. Can't forget that marketing genius.
Yeah, that's my favorite character that was new in this movie. I say there were used to be like for him, probably life-size figure, where you like push the arm and you go the hey. I really wish we would have picked one of those up. I should have when it was on clearance. But
Yeah. How do you feel about him speaking his own language most of the time, but then he'd speak the basic tongue a little bit as well? Simple phrases.
I mean, since I had no um previous knowledge of this character and the species, I
Yeah,
felt it was okay.
yeah.
Um, I know we have another podcast coming out, I think soon, where we talked about there's a movie called, uh, was it The Battle for Endor is what it was called? And it was like an old Ewok movie from the 80s. And this movie takes place before Return of the Jedi, and Wicket can speak fluent English. Whereas when we watch Return of the Jedi, he can't speak a lick of English.
Hmm.
So like that kind of a dynamic is upsetting, but with Babu Freak, where maybe his species knows some English, it
Yeah,
didn't really bother me.
and they're very clearly intelligent. So I mean, it's not that far fetched, but it just seems a little on the nose for me, I guess. But
Like convenient that they can speak English.
yeah, that he can just say all these phrases that make him so much cuter.
Oh, I see.
Like specifically his reappearances into the Star Wars world. Uh, in Mandalorian, it kind of bugged me a little bit more, but um, in this movie, it was fine.
Gotcha. Yeah, I really liked Babu Freak. Like I said, my favorite character that was new in this movie. Um, but definitely also just up there in general.
Yeah.
The little dude.
Yep.
All right. Well, that was kind of our little intro section about, what it was like during the time when Rise of Skywalker was coming out and all the buzz around it. So when we come back, we are going to talk about some of our tough loves for the Rise of Skywalker. So strap in. Have you ever wondered what it's like to grow up during the prequel era? Do you wonder what type of merchandise was around then? How different was it than it is now? Check out our videos on this channel where we talk about the merchandise of The Phantom Menace and the merchandise of Attack of the Clones. They are here on this channel. The Phantom Menace is my first video ever on YouTube, so there's a special place in my heart for that one, so please, if any, check that out. Now back to our show. Welcome back, everybody. We are here now to talk about some tough love for the Rise of Skywalker. I guess I'll just kind of kick it off with one of them that bugs me is there is some very like awkward conversations in the movie, not because what they're talking about is awkward. It's like the cadence of how they're talking with one another. Some of them that I can pick out specifically is like there's an interaction between Poe and Zori where one person will say something and it almost seems like the other person is just like right there ready to be I don't know how to describe this. So when Sarah and I were talking about Book of Boba Fett back when that came out, one of our complaints was that when they did their choreography, it felt like when somebody went to punch, that it just looked like everything was purely choreographed. I'm going to punch here, so you block there. I'm going to punch there, so you block there. And it felt like that kind of verbally, where one person would say something and then they would just have something where they don't even have time to think about a reaction, but they had one and it was back and forth. And it just kind of seemed not believable to me.
Unnatural.
Yeah, if
Like
that makes
the
sense.
timing of it.
Right. And so there was a couple of instances in the movie where it was like that. And I think if like one or two happened, I wouldn't think of it so much. But because it happens periodically throughout the movie between characters, uh, it I don't like it. So that's one of my tough loves for the movie is that I wish the cadence of the delivery of some of those interactions would have been more believable as opposed to looking just like they're rehearsed.
Yep, definitely.
So one of the things that I didn't really like, kind of on the similar spectrum of the voice acting or the conversations not being super fluid, was at the beginning of the film. Ray is meditating. She's kind of floating up, I don't know, 6 feet off the ground or something like that. And she's saying, like, be with me, be with me. They're not with me, right? Because she's trying to talk to like the Force ghosts and whatnot, and just the other Jedi. When she says they're not with me, she does this really weird, like, trapeze front flip forward to land on the ground, and it looks way too fluid of emotion. Like, it's very clear that she's on trapeze strings, even though you can't see the strings. That it just doesn't look Star Wars natural, if that's even a thing.
Kind of makes me wonder what it should look like. Like what would more natural look like from hopping out of the air?
Probably not doing a flip.
I think something every great Jedi can do is land gracefully
Yeah,
and without slowing themselves with the Force. You know, you just bend the knees and you can just do a controlled descent.
like a
I, I don't, I don't know. It was it's it's kind of something I was going to bring up later, but I think they put in a lot of like little moments of levity in this movie just to like keep the energy, the vibes a little bit happier. Like, she's kind of upset that she didn't connect with them, but look how great she is at force powers. So I feel like they try to give you these little, you know, you're not getting the main course, but you're just getting like a little snack of something periodically.
I could see that. Austin, what's something that you weren't a big fan of in this film?
It kind of goes along with what you and Jeremy were saying, where some of the moments don't quite land. I think some of the moments need a little bit more time to breathe. I think the movie just was overall kind of rushed. But I understand completely and fully why. They had a very tall task ahead of them. Um, they, like Jeremy said, had to kind of pick up the pieces after really the whole fandom kind of was split after this movie. The fandom kind of became a dyad of
yeah.
liking where the new stuff was going with Disney and really wanting them to just leave it alone or keep it the way it was. They didn't want anything to be changed, and things are going to change when one artist takes something and makes you know their impression on it.
How do we make this super unique? How about each film is unique and then together they will be ultimately unique? No, what it ends up being is that dragon picture where there's like two of them that are pretty cool looking and one of them that looks like a doof.
Yeah, kind of an odd stepbrother or third twin or something like that. Triplet. Yeah,
Speaking of things that didn't land, how about they fly now?
That was
Yeah,
next on my list.
You think they were hoping to slap that on a t-shirt or something?
yeah,
I
maybe.
feel like it just gets cringier every time I watch it. It doesn't sound fluid.
And not only that, they flew in the past. That
Yeah,
wasn't new.
yeah, jetpacks were not a thing of the future, but the everyday stormtrooper wasn't usually equipped with a jetpack, so I guess that's kind of that was a new thing for them.
Some of the
But
elites were, but yeah, not the average ones.
right.
I think another big tough love for myself would be uh, there was too much taken out of this film. People have gone on in interviews to say XYZ was filmed and they cut it from the movie, and then there's a good handful of these things that just kind of feel diluted. So, for example, in the opening when Kylo Ren is like ripping through those people, and the planet looks like a big ash forest. I guarantee you there's probably a good majority of the fandom that still doesn't know that that was Mustafar, and that it once things were brought back to balance with Mustafar, that's why it is now turning back into this luscious planet, because Mustafar was not always a lava planet. We get it explained in the Darth Vader VR video game that there is this thing that happened basically where someone stole the essence of the planet and turned it into this volcanic nightmare. And once it was returned and restored, the planet was slowly going back to what it used to be. And that's what was going on in this film, is it was turning back into that really nice nature biome, whatever you want to call it, environment that it once was. And so there's one thing with that people probably don't know, and there's another thing where when Kylo opens up that little chest thing and pulls out the Wayfinder, there's a whole scene before that where he's actually fighting with the guardian of the Wayfinder. There was like a monstrous beast that was supposed to be protecting it, and so we don't get that stuff. That we do get it in the comics, because I think there's a Vader one where Vader is like talking to his guardian of his Wayfinder, because that was Vader's Wayfinder on Mustafar. Why? Because he has a castle there. That's why. And so uh, that stuff was stripped out, and I'm sure there's tons of other stuff that could have been in there. I just recently read something where there was some dialogue that was cut from the scene between Kylo and the Emperor, and I don't remember exactly what was said, but it was something along the lines of like Kylo says, "You're dead," and "You're a clone," or something like that, where they bring it to the forefront of what he is, and he says something along the lines of less of man, more of power, or whatever, trying to insinuate that he's less of a being, but more or less like this embodiment of the dark side. And it's like, how does that get left on the cutting room floor? Like, what mystery? If that was in there, everybody would have been like, "Oh, all right, that gives us something to go off of," as opposed to like, we got 2 years to get this movie out. There's no explanation. Just throw them in there, kind of a thing. So
I
Yeah, it
didn't
was.
realize that there was that much left out, like that was made and left out, because that stuff sounds awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, just to get a little bit of like Kylo's motivations, because he is tearing through those people in the beginning of the movie. And all you get from the opening crawl is that Kylo feels like his power might be threatened. And that's just not enough, I think, for him to be tearing through those people the way that he is.
yeah. So there's a lot of context that is not in the film, but kind of like what I say about when Sarah and I watch Star Wars projects, we both have a different lens that we watch these through. So like when we were rewatching the movie, I was like, "Oh yeah," and this all this other stuff happens and I can fill in the gaps, but to an average viewer, even someone that's watching it for the first time, you know, they're probably going to have the reaction that most people had when this movie came out and just be like, what the heck? One of our friends that's been on this podcast before, Jeff, I still remember so he got to see the movie before I did. Like, I got tickets to the Friday night. He got tickets to like the Thursday night or something like that. And I had asked him what his thought was, and he goes, I don't even really know how to process what I went through. He said he felt like he's in jet lag because it was boom, 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 go, go, go. There was nothing that let the movie breathe. And I think that stuff that would have let the movie breathe was the stuff that was cut because they had to go, go, go. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it was almost like and depending on who you ask in Lucasfilm, this was the plan all along, was to bring Palpatine back. But the first two movies don't exactly give you any, you know, little clues that that's where it's headed. But regardless, they throw him right away, right in the beginning, which is fine and great. But they don't. Gosh, where was we going with this? They kind of like you said, they don't really explain too much of why or where it came from. They still keep it a mystery, right? They even kind of flip it and then they flip it back on Ray. And that scene closes with him saying, be careful, she's not who you think she is. Which this whole time we've been trying to figure out who Ray is. So now they're kindly finally giving us that answer, but they're still keeping it a mystery in the third movie until, we get 75% of the way through and then finally it comes out. But
which kind of actually lines up. So when Sarah and I were watching this movie, I think I've told her before, but I like to talk about stuff anyways, even if I have sometimes. And I was telling her that I think when JJ was piecing this movie together, I think this movie is two movies that are just very watered down and like they cut so much from the two films and then put them together. I think the moment that she finds out that she is a Palpatine, I think that is where episode 8 should have ended. And I think that kind of goes along with, kind of what you're saying. We don't find out until way, way late in the third movie, whereas I think if that would have been accomplished in the second movie of the trilogy and that would have been our cliffhanger, maybe she even taps into the dark side a little bit more at that moment and we're kind of left with like a teaser of her eyes turning yellow or something. I don't know.
Or even her holding a double-bladed red lightsaber after we knew she was a Palpatine. How crazy would that be?
Yeah. Have that kind of be the ending of the film. The final shot before we have to leave the theater and wait 2 more years.
Yeah.
That would have been crazy.
Sarah, did you have another thing you didn't like?
Yeah, so Austin kind of brought up how they liked to flip things, then flip them again. And so one thing that I know Jeremy wasn't a super fan with is kind of the nobody dies type concept. Like they thought Chewie died, and then it wasn't even that much later in the film. They flipped it back to he's alive. I can like sense him, even though he doesn't have force powers. And I feel like we did the same thing with Zori too, where we think she's dead because the planet blew up, and then later we find out that she's not. And I feel like her character would have been better received, and maybe her toys would have sold more if when she gave them that little Imperial puck thing to get them the landing privileges, why didn't she just go with them? Because then she could have tagged along. She could have been, another person on this adventure or whatever, because eventually she kind of joins the resistance at the very end. If she joined sooner, we wouldn't have had that fake out of she's dead, no, she's not, she's dead, no, she's not, and it would have just been, she could have had more substance to her character.
If I remember correctly, and this is not referenced in the movie at all, but I think I think she had somebody else on the planet that she was with, like a sibling or something. That's my
Something to
guess.
stay back for.
Well, so like she had to go find her sibling and then she could take off, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But again, that's not in the movie, so I think your point is completely valid. I'll be honest, when all that happened, I didn't even think about Zori when that planet blew up. I was just like, all right, she's just off on her own thing. I didn't even think she was dead, but I can see how people could think of that.
Yeah.
I think I just didn't care.
Hey, in the final moments of her evacuating that planet, there could have been some heroic moments for Zori that we just never got to see. And that really could have helped her character out, probably.
Yeah, maybe we'll get it in like a Tales of the Smuggler,
Yeah.
and we can see what she did.
Yeah.
Jeremy, how do you feel about Dio?
Oh, I've told you how I feel about Dio. But as far as this
Tell me again.
podcast, in case you haven't seen our other podcast about this situation, because I think we brought it up when we were talking about our favorite and least favorite Star Wars characters on a previous podcast. And my least favorite was Dio. Why? Because he's uninspired, and I think he's a waste of time. So this movie needed to have a new droid of some sort. And I was telling Sarah that I think people were at the cafeteria in the early morning thinking about this over breakfast. And somebody picked up their donut, picked up their styrofoam cup with their coffee that was already drank, and was like, Dio. And that's essentially what it is. And so we have a wheel with a styrofoam cup on it. And J.J. Abrams wanted to make sure he was a part of the Star Wars universe, so he voiced Dio. Trying to Solo came before this movie, and he kind of reminds me of the like social justice droid because he's always like, no thank you, no thank you, don't touch me, kind of a thing, like just trying to avoid people. Whereas like she's kind of like that too, doesn't really care about humans. But again, if you read more of the books, you can find out more stuff about Dio and Ochi of Bastoon. That was the assassin dude in the movie.
That was the person whose ship they found.
Yeah. I think it's called Shadows of the Sith. It's a pretty good book. I don't recommend a whole lot of Star Wars books, but that's one of them.
Yeah, they only really say this droid was clearly mistreated, which tells you that Ochi person's probably not a very good person.
No, he was a very ornery, short-tempered individual.
Yeah. Well, we get like one quick, like 3 second flashback, right? Of like them killing Ray's parents, or
Yeah.
presumably.
Yep. Yeah, that whole book is about them running from these running away from Ochi, and then Luke and Lando are trying to figure out some of the stuff with the dark side. And the really cool thing about that book, this was a part of the promotional stuff, is that there is a moment where Luke like projects himself to Exegol, and he gets in a bind with these like Sith spirits, and his father Anakin comes to his aid, and they're like fending off Sith spirits together. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's cool.
Maybe we'll see it in a movie.
Austin, I remember there being a part of Force Ghost Luke that you weren't a fan of.
Yeah. I do like that those few scenes. Like I think um that Luke is a lot more of what we expected going into the last movie. Just his, he's inspiring. He is telling Ray exactly, what she needs to hear, and um, he's a little blunt about some parts of it, but I think he gets the point across. The thing I don't like is how they're continuing to stretch and stretch and stretch what it means to be a Force ghost. um, and what they're capable of. For example, you probably already know where I'm going with this. Rey tries to throw away the lightsaber because she's kind of lost all hope. She retreats back to the island where Luke was at, and she's throwing the lightsaber into the fire. And then who grabs it but Force Ghost Luke? And he gives us probably, I wrote it down because it's one of my favorite lines from the movie. A Jedi's weapon should be treated with more respect. Uh, just throwing a little shots back at you know episode 8, but
Exactly.
um so that was a nice moment. But then as he's talking to her, they're trying to make it a big moment, right? Big majestic moment. So like he's got his hair all down and it's waving back in the wind, Luke's hair, as he's a Force ghost. So it's like, really, as a Force ghost the wind is blowing his hair? Come on, come on.
Well, and don't forget that, like, right after that, he lifts his entire X-Wing out of the water as a
Yeah,
Force ghost.
see, that one didn't bother me as much after the lightning in the last movie, but
So here's the question. If you were to punch a Force ghost, would it fall over?
yeah, that's a great question, and I don't think so.
Say, or do they get a choice?
Well, because
Well, in
in
episode
the last movie, Kylo was hitting him with a lightsaber and it wasn't doing anything.
that was a projection. That wasn't a Force ghost.
Oh,
But
yeah.
in episode 6, Obi-Wan sits on a log. I'm just saying.
Yeah, uh,
Or maybe he just used the Force to hold his butt right above it.
yeah. I mean, they can make themselves appear however they want, right? Uh, Once they, perish and their life force becomes the life force, where they fade away, um, like Leia and Ben do, at the end. Um, you know, the
I
secrets
think
are unlocked.
I think the idea of that scene was really good. Like the spitting back in Ryan Johnson's face about the thing with the lightsaber. I think that was great. Especially since we know JJ can't be happy about what Ryan did to his project. But I also kind of wish that the way that Mark Hamill delivered the line would have been a little bit better. I kind of feel like the way he said it was kind of like a Karen type way. Like he just had like that head motion going on. It was like a little more sassy. I wish it was a little more like stern, like he had to like he was trying to teach her a lesson as opposed to uh we saw him smiling, so he was trying to be, joking around with her kind of a thing. But
Yeah, no, I could definitely. That's one of the times where I think the actor's portrayal, because Mark Hamill wasn't happy with what he was asked to do signing on to the project.
right.
So I think it was kind of both of them, with maybe the director directing Mark Hamill and also Mark Hamill's feelings about the situation.
Like looking at Daisy, imagine her as Ryan Johnson. How would you tell him to respect this lightsaber? Kind of a thing.
Pretty much. Pretty much. But yeah, the Force Ghost and how they appear and interact with the real world was something that bugged me a little bit. But yeah, did you guys have other ones?
I just thought it was really weird or interesting how in the last movie they had this big call out for help and nobody came and did anything. And then this one, again, we had a really big call out for help, for the resistance. And it seemed like nobody was coming because nobody came the last time. So why would they come this time? And all of a sudden, Lando comes in with this whole, like, huge fleet of people coming in to help save things. And it's like, where were these people in the last movie?
Your
Yes, where
answers
were they?
lie within the book. The
Jeremy?
reason why nobody came in episode 8 is because the First Order blocked their communications. And so nobody was able to receive it. Whereas this time, Lando literally flew around the galaxy to go and try to gather people.
Oh, see, I didn't know that. Okay. Okay.
because they don't explain anything in the movies anymore.
No, there's
I
not
know.
time. We
It's
gotta
what they are.
we gotta
I
get this movie out.
I totally feel for the situation, and I don't disagree with that point of view because I, I probably had that same thought when I saw it, to be perfectly honest. And then I read the book, and then it made more sense. But I Star Wars is a movie first and a book second, and I don't think it should be like Harry Potter or Twilight, where the books came first, and they do their best to put that on film. Star Wars shouldn't be putting out a movie and then hoping that the book picks up the pieces. It should not be that way.
Yeah, they could learn a lot from the basics of storytelling.
Yeah. Or taking your time and putting out quality over quantity.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like this.
They pushed a lot of things. Um Jeremy, did you have more for tough love situation?
I mean, I said the two because I mean, honestly, the pulling the scenes out and whatnot is some of the, one thing. It's kind of a tough love, kind of a wishful thinking. I didn't like how they portrayed the Jedi voices at the end. I wish it would have been the actors behind her, like as if they were trying to help her with being all the Jedi.
Right.
I feel like it would have been way more powerful of a scene to see, Luke, Anakin, Qui-Gon, all the people that were saying things,
Right.
uh, helping her with that final push.
Yeah. Like if a Force Ghost can grab a lightsaber out of midair, it can certainly kneel down beside Rey, give her a little nuzzle, shake her, and say, "Hey, you got to get back."
Yeah. So, but again, that is a what do you call that?
Well, it would have been costly, right? To like get all the actors, and
It
you have to
would have.
decide like how you want all of them to appear. Like even in the movie, I didn't recognize half of those Jedi voices. Um,
They're
yeah, but watching it with even with subtitles, I didn't recognize all of them. Um,
I
and
personally don't know who. I don't remember who is all supposed to be a part of it, but I do know at least Luke, Anakin, and Obi-Wan and
yep,
Yoda say something. I
and
think
Mace
Ahsoka
Windu.
doesn't Ahsoka say something too?
Yep, Mace Windu and Ahsoka. Those were pretty much the ones that I had kind of recognized. Kanan Jarrus has a line. There's like another, maybe one or two lines from other Jedi that I didn't quite pick up on. But yeah, those are ones I never would have got. And I think I just said this, but yeah, how do you decide how those characters are going to look as Force Ghosts if you go with the approach that you were saying? I think that I agree with you. I think that would have made the scene a lot stronger, but I think they would have had like some hard calls to make about how do we make these people appear and in what way.
There is a fan edit on YouTube that did do it. Um,
Okay.
so I guess it's kind of like if you watch it, you
Yeah.
can decide for yourself whether you thought it was good or
Yeah, I'll
not.
have to
But
check that out. That sounds pretty cool.
yeah, I don't. I'm sure if you just type in Rise of Skywalker fan edit something, it'll probably pop up.
Ending. Yeah. Yeah.
But honestly, a lot of the things that I didn't like, I mean, you guys also said so. Uh, I just honestly came prepared with two of them, and then Sarah told me she had like a list. So I was like, well, there's bound to be something on there that I didn't like too. So,
Yeah.
did you guys get all the ones from your lists in here?
Um,
I'm all set for now.
the only other one I have is more of just generally how they spent the movie with it being, we got to go to this planet and do this side quest and go to this planet and do this side quest. And they kind of bounced all around just to get back to Exegol. And especially in the ways in which they did it, like I didn't particularly love them like finding the knife and then the knife like matching up to the sky and the horizon where the Star Destroyer wreckage was. Um, I didn't love all that.
Because the wreckage is going to stay the same as when that knife was built, however many years ago, right?
Yeah, and there was like a lot of big waves on that planet that very well could have
Shifted it.
shifted everything. Could be completely different landscape. But
Yeah.
It didn't even like point to a door or anything. It just pointed to like an arbitrary spot on the Death Star. Like, okay,
yep.
I guess it means that the Death Star is the right place to go, but it doesn't really tell you where to go.
Well, and not only that, once they got the knife, they had to translate the inscription on the knife, which they couldn't translate because it was in the Sith language, and C-3PO couldn't translate it. So they had to go to a different planet to get C-3PO in a form where he could translate it. And it's like, oh no, we're gonna lose 3PO, but we don't actually lose him. It's just all
That's
this dancing
another death, not
around
death.
in order. Yeah, another flip flop. Yeah, you didn't even bring up the ending where the ending is just like 3 flip flops in a row.
Yeah.
Where Ben gets pushed down into an abyss, and then surprise, he's not dead either. But Rey is somehow dead from exhaustion, and then they do the little life force transferring and flip flops again. So,
Jeremy, I saw you smirking earlier. Don't you dare tell me it's all in the books.
Well, when he said he went over the edge and somehow he was fine, my first thing was there's a comic book that explains that.
Yeah. No, he's obviously a very capable warrior in Jedi. Like I'm not surprised that he survived, but
no, the thing that I made my eyeballs all big on was so, and I hate to sound so nerdy about this, but so they use the Wayfinder. The Sith translation gave them the coordinates of where to stand to find it, all that good stuff. That's fine, but it's pointing at where the Emperor sat on the Death Star, like his little throne room, because like just like Vader, how his Wayfinder was on Mustafar by Vader's castle, Palpatine's Wayfinder was in a room next to him from where he sat on Death Star 2. And so that's where it was sending her. Like that's not a random room, that's what the room was.
Well, if I had no Wayfinder, that would have been a no knife map. That would have been the first room I checked.
Yeah. I definitely think there would have been a better way to handle finding it. Like maybe Luke tells her that like when he was, fighting for his father's life on the Death Star 2, maybe he saw something or he felt a dark presence there that he didn't understand. Just something that would have been like in that throne room.
Yeah, something about there were 2 made, well, we don't know where this one is, but we do know where the other one could be, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that was the Emperor's last known place that he was at. It could have been very easily put in there like that.
Yeah.
I think we're starting to get a lot of wishful thinking, though. I wish it was done this way. I wish this would have been this.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, we've talked a lot about things that we don't like. When we come back, we're going to talk about some things that we do like, and we'll see how long that segment compares to this one. So stick around. Have you ever wondered what Amazon coffins are and what they're full of? Well, we got you covered here on the channel. Check out our playlist of our Amazon coffin unboxings, where Sarah and I open up boxes that have Amazon returns, and we share with all of you what we get in each of those boxes. If you ever wanted to get into liquidation and want to know what types of things you can find, check us out. Now back to our show. Welcome back, everybody. We are here to talk about the things that we did like about the Rise of Skywalker. I'll go ahead and kick it off with aside from the fact that there was some things left on the cutting room floor from the opening, I thought the opening with Kylo Ren, like once he gets to Exegol, I thought that was a very cool opening. We get to follow the villain, to kick off the film. Uh, and I think that the audio choices, because he's in this like big cave and he hears the echoing of the Emperor's voice. I remember when we were in the theater, I was like, geez, it sounds like it's echoing in here because the sound quality was so cool. And just that whole opening sequence of, learning about, what's been happening behind the scenes and whatnot. I felt like with the way that the movie is paced to be go go go, I felt that that opening sequence was just enough of that, even though I wanted a little bit more. But I felt like it established the film well enough from the starting perspective, if that's the way to word it. But then we jump into like light speed skipping, and then like that's one way to rush it, in my opinion. So I'm glad that we started with Kylo first and then moved on to the other stuff, because that pulled me in. I was like, okay, yes, let's start with the bad guy, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, we're very interested in that guy.
Yeah, at least I am.
Yeah, that's a good
Well,
one.
part of him too, Ray was part of this too, but in terms of like dark side type stuff was when they're searching into the Death Star, the set looked really cool and the music was super spooky. I loved it.
You know, so you're talking about when Ray is looking for the Wayfinder. Do you know where that music is originally from?
I mean, it sounds familiar, but I couldn't tell you exactly when.
That music is from when Vader is dying. Like Luke is like looking at his father's face for the first time.
Interesting.
Just a fun
I did
fact.
not know that.
Yeah, I usually can recognize when I've heard it before, but picking out where it's from is very difficult for me.
Okay, I got your back, Austin.
All right, awesome. Yeah, that whole sequence, Sarah, is really really good, just like start to finish, with visuals and music. Pretty much from the point that they land on that moon, really. Um, that planet is just gorgeous looking, and the visuals with the waves, especially when Ray takes the skimmer out. Um, those are visually really great scenes, leading all the way up to the actual like lightsaber fight that happens outside. How they move from platform to platform, trying not to get washed away. Um, those are good scenes.
You guys happen to know why they picked it to be that way? Like why they had it out in the middle of the water?
Just to be visually different, I imagine. Different. They've already done like the lava river. Let's do a real river.
So that's basically what it is. They say Star Wars is poetic, and so the ending of the prequels was with lava all around them, and then this one was with the water crashing all around them. I say I know what my next one is, but what you guys got?
I have like a big one, but
What's your big one?
um, the whole dyad thing. They really dove into it in this movie and went full in on it, and I think they did that very well to show like how connected Ray and Ben Solo were, um, and they yeah, I mean their connections there the whole movie. They have learned a little bit more about it, and to the point where he figures out where Ray is at multiple points actually because of their connection. So
Yeah, speaking of that, that's like one of my favorite scenes. I thought it was super cool how like when she was in his like quarters and he was down on the planet and that whole fight between the two of them, like they're fighting within like the dyad realm, if you that's what you want to call it. I thought that was super cool.
Yeah,
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 that
with like the berries go all over the floor, and
Hmm.
their combats and stuff were really neat. There was a lot of really cool lightsaber battles in here. One thing that I really liked was C-3PO's character. It was I feel like unlike the lightsabers being mistreated, he was somebody that was treated more properly, I think. One of my so I got two different pieces from him from the movie that I really like. One towards the beginning when they're going through the quicksand and Poe is calling for like Rey and Finn to make sure they're okay, and C-3PO goes, "You didn't call my name, sir, but I'm all right." That just sounds like classic 3PO to me. And then one of the other ones that gets me every time was him saying that he's taking one last look at his friends before he gets his memory wiped. And I know a lot of people don't like that because like his best friends, would be like Leia and Han and Chewie. But I feel like he's spent a decent amount of time with these characters too, enough to say, if I'm really getting my memory wiped right now, I want to take one last look at the friends that I know that are here because Luke and Han and Chewie and Leia, they weren't there.
Well,
So I still like the line.
I was gonna say at the same time, I mean, Luke and Han were dead. What's he gonna do? Visit their grave?
yeah, yes, 3PO has been through a lot.
Yeah, this felt like an original trilogy 3PO, which was kind of a nice touch to the movie.
Yeah, as usual, the droids are stealing the show, except for Dio, not him.
Yeah, not Dio. Mm-mm. My next one that I really liked about this movie, and when we were watching, I told Sarah, I said I think this is probably one of the best scenes in the movie, is the turning point for Kylo, where he switches to the light side. He gets that moment with his dad again, because this moment is basically almost word for word the same thing from The Force Awakens, but the way that it should have gone if Han would have been successful. And so I thought that was a great way for JJ to bring, like, JJ had this uh goal of being able to be like, what is a justifiable way to make Kylo turn back to the light side? What is something that could be unique? And I thought that this was a very cool way to do that. It's not just like in episode 8 when Rey is basically regurgitating the same things that were said to people in the original trilogy of don't go to the dark side, and it's all stuff that wasn't original, whereas this was, in my opinion, an original way to make him turn back to the light side. um so I really like that scene. He finally takes that lightsaber and then chucks it,
He was
which
strong enough.
it's okay that he disrespected that one, I suppose, because that was a dark side lightsaber. Although it was very cool, like the lightsaber itself.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that scene. Because of him not being a force ghost, but kind of just like a figment of his imagination, I don't know, it's just kind of weird to
I
me.
I
I
do
have a
think
hard time conceptualizing what's actually happening.
I do think he's just imagining it. Because if he was a force ghost, he would be blue. So that's one way to
Right. Well,
discern
he's
that.
he's also not a force wielder.
Right. That is true.
yeah. This isn't really the Force Ghost thing was supposed to be like something they learned how to do. Like it's not something every Jedi could necessarily. I mean, they could probably learn it given the right teachers and stuff, but you don't just die and then the next day you're instantly like blue walking around.
Right. Vader learned it very quickly though.
Yeah, very quickly. But he was
So
the chosen one.
one of the things that Jeremy and I have been doing recently is watching the Rebels TV show. And so as I'm going through this and I'm kind of learning more and more about some force abilities, you know, one of the big ones that they really hit on in that show is the ability to connect with animals or other creatures. And so it gave me a new appreciation for when, you know, after Ray and her little group fall through the quicksand, and there's like that snake serpent thing that, you know, they're Poe's wanting to kill it, and Finn's not sure what to do, and Ray's like, just hold on a second. And she's able to connect, and um, she does a force heal thing, which is not necessarily in Rebels, but she's able to connect with this creature. Um, and now that I've seen Rebels and I've seen it more times, it makes more sense to me, and I have a better appreciation for it. So that was one thing that I thought was neat, that I picked up on in this rewatch that I didn't really understand a whole lot in the first watch through.
Yeah, definitely. The big snake's definitely like immediately very hostile. Probably these people just showed up in its home. Um, but yeah, she does make that connection very quickly, and she's able to actually, help the creature out because she realizes it's hurt. So yeah, that's cool. Um, I'm not sure who taught her how to do that, but it was cool.
I mean, somebody had to teach themselves these things in the first place, you know, not everybody
Right,
had a teacher.
right, right.
My guess is either the sacred texts or Leia.
Yeah,
But it's kind of weird, like how it was used a ton in this movie, but you know, if this was Jedi knowledge, why didn't Anakin just learn this force heal? Where if he saw Padme almost on her deathbed, he could have just been like, force heal, you know?
yeah.
Mind blown.
A lot of things could have gone differently in the universe had this been a more common practice
Yeah.
with Jedi. But
Oh yeah, Qui-Gon too. I mean, like in this movie, Rey puts a hole through Kylo. And so if she can heal that hole, well then, you know, why couldn't Obi-Wan have maybe learned that, did it to Qui-Gon? But I guess that's beside the point. That's not a knock on George Lucas's Star Wars. That is a, do you really think it's probable to do that, Disney? But
yeah, the the speed and rate at which they're just back to normal. Like I guess I would have liked it a little bit more if it was an imperfect technique rather like it'll heal the wound, it'll seal you shut so you're not you're not leaking out blood onto the ground, but you're still injured, but your wound is it's on the healing path. It's
I think that would
rather
have made more sense.
Yeah, rather than just going back to the same skin tone, no scarring, no anything. um,
The thing
One
that
thing I was gonna say, one thing that Disney did that kind of fixed what George Lucas did, and this is a real tiny thing, is Chewie finally got his medal.
yep.
So
yeah,
yay.
Heck yeah, he did. Yeah, the ending, I don't know if you guys are ready to jump to the that part of the ending yet, but that whole ending sequence really brings you back to like the original movies, which is
which
cool.
ending sequence?
When they're celebrating and stuff, and after they get their medals. Yeah, not the Tatooine lightsaber scene, but just with people celebrating.
Yeah. Oh, that's another one that we forgot. I'm gonna write that one down.
The lightsabers in the sand, or
Rey Skywalker.
uh
We'll talk about that in the final segment, unless that's something you guys like. But
We'll wait for it.
not particularly. I do like that she has her own lightsaber. I think her own lightsaber is really cool looking.
I would agree with that.
It
Let's see. What other things do we like?
I'm good with this section, so if there's other things, go ahead.
Oh, one thing that I can say is that I think, and this is kind of what, in a way, disappoints me that this was the final film. I felt like our main characters finally like really hit their stride with their acting. So like if you compare this film to The Force Awakens, it's kind of night and day. Like how Daisy Ridley was acting, Finn, Poe, all that stuff. Like I felt like they really settled into their characters by this film. And it was to the point where I was like, I wish I could see more of these people now, but it's over. And
Hmm.
so maybe with this new movie coming out that's supposed to be following Ray, hopefully we can build on that momentum.
Yeah, at least a few of them, whoever they can convince.
Yeah, that's money is gonna have to talk probably.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like that's about it for our things that we liked. So when we come back, we're gonna wrap it up here, talk about some things that we forgot to mention before. So stick around. Have you seen The Mandalorian? Do you wonder what Operation Cinder was that they mentioned in this show? Well, we got you covered because we have an entire playlist dedicated to the Star Wars Battlefront 2 campaign, which highlights Operation Cinder. So if you check out our playlist, you'll be able to see what actually happened with Operation Cinder and know what they're talking about with the show. Now back to ours. Welcome back, everybody, for our final segment here. We're talking about Rise of Skywalker. We've talked about a lot of stuff that we didn't like, some things that we did like, and there was a couple of things on the break where we were like, you know what? We forgot to talk about some of these things. And in my opinion, they're pretty important. I'm going to kick it off with one that I haven't told the group on the break yet, and that was in the beginning of the movie when Kylo and the Emperor are talking about, their stuff, and the Emperor was like, I could give you this fleet and whatnot. The camera shows the Emperor's hands visible, and then it shows all the ships like coming out of this crust on the planet or whatever. And a lot of people believe that that was him using the Force. In the book, it clarifies that that's not what was happening. It was just a visual of his hands. Probably a little bit more to just show how deteriorated he was. But those ships definitely took off on their own. So I think the way it was filmed was kind of poor because, again, we don't have that context. But, like, if you were to have that notion of he's so powerful right now, he can lift hundreds or thousands of ships. Why can't he just wipe out all the people in the sky? I mean, that's a valid argument.
He tries to.
He does try to. But yeah, that's just one thing I wanted to put out there is I think that's a misconception and it's not very clear in the film.
Yeah, I just learned that right now from you saying it. So that does make a little bit more sense.
Yeah. Go ahead,
One
Sarah.
thing that really bothered me in our first watch through was the Rey and Kylo kiss. And I know that I don't know if controversial is the right word because I don't really know many people that actually liked it. And a lot of people thought it was misplaced and not really belonging in the Star Wars universe and stuff. And I was one of those people for a very long time. And now that I've watched it again, and I've focused more on the movie and the connection between Rey and Kylo throughout the films. There's a lot more of an emotional connection than what I had watched when I'd watched it the first time. And I think that's because there's so much going on in this movie. It's really hard to pay attention to things like emotional connections because you're trying to figure out what else, everything else is going on. So not to say that I like it necessarily because I think we could have easily done without. But it didn't hit me as hard of like a gross, like it was just okay.
Let's say can we talk about the controversy that did happen with that kiss? So after that happened, I myself and a lot of other fans started to piece this together. We were like, okay, wait a minute. So Kylo is the grandson of Vader. Rey is the granddaughter of the Emperor. And there was a comic book that came out not too much earlier than this film, where there is a shot in the comic book where the Emperor is like doing this over like a force bubble, and Shmi is in the bubble, so that it looks like he was the one that mixed with the midichlorians to have her birth Anakin. And so there's this idea that Palpatine was Anakin's father because of what he did with the Force. And so people started to put it together of like, are these dudes kissing cousins? Like, what is going on here, Disney? And once Disney was approached with that, they referenced the comic book and they're like, no, that totally wasn't it. Even though when they released it, that's how everybody perceived it and it was fine. But now that they released The Rise of Skywalker and people put it together, they're like, no, that never happened.
Yeah, because didn't Anakin have kind of like a Jesus-like birth where they didn't really know there was like no father or something?
Right. Yep. No father, just the will of the Force, whether it was the good or the bad side. So that's why, with them putting that visual out there, it was kind of like, well, what are you trying to portray with this visual if that's not it?
So,
And
so Anakin was his Force baby, and then Rey was eventually his baby made through conventional means.
yeah, basically.
They're
So
not technically cousins.
yeah, not anymore. So yeah, that was one of those weird things that came out of that. But I think if I remember correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, didn't someone like yell "what" in the movie theater when we saw it?
I don't remember, but I would not be surprised.
I'm pretty sure I remember that. I didn't vocally say it, but I definitely thought of it. Like, don't you do it? Don't, oh, what kind of a thing.
Yeah, like, is this really happening right now?
I mean, she kisses him and he dies. It's like the kiss of death. She's
Yeah,
poisoned.
my immediate worry was like, okay, great. Where is this going now? Like, what's going to be the next thing to happen? But then he dies right after. So I was like, okay, I guess it can, if that's the last thing that happens before you die, sure.
Which is kind of interesting. And I really hope this is the last time I say this, but in the book, they explain that when you do force heal, that you lose a little bit of essence of your being because you're basically transforming or transferring part of yourself to this being that you're trying to heal. And I think the fact that he brought her back from the death is what overdid it for himself. And that might be why he killed over after doing that.
Yeah, kind of like the opposite of what Palpatine was doing before, where he was kind of like sucking their life force
Yeah,
to get his strength back.
which kind of makes sense. The dark side is the opposite of the light, and if the light gives, the dark side takes. Kind of a cool thing that was going on there.
Yeah. Um, Overall, I guess there are just a couple scenes that don't quite work for me. We were kind of talking about this over the break, but um, the horseback on top of the Star Destroyer in midair. We were kind of talking about how we didn't all love that. Kind of felt out of place. We didn't really care too much about those characters in the moment, except for Finn. And BB-8 was there for some reason. Um, but we understand that in that scene, everyone's got to come together to accomplish this mission
They do
because they're so
say
strong.
like so like when after they switched from the one that was like on the ground or whatever to this one that was on a command ship,
Yep.
um like as the transports were arriving, the final order people were like, jam their sensors or shut down whatever they're saying about the ships, and they're like,
The speeders. They said jam
"Oh
the
yeah."
speeders.
They're like, "We can't do that." Why? Because they're not speeders, kind of a thing. So I get it, but I don't understand why they couldn't have just had like the normal ships fly in there and
Oh, okay. I had a
oh
different
yeah,
idea.
yeah. Why don't they
Just
just
turn the ship.
what it was doing when it was falling apart?
Yeah. And to piggyback right on that, um, Finn gets miraculously saved by making it off the Star Destroyer and leaping onto the top of the Falcon. Um, uh, Hopefully, they make it into an emergency hatch right away because that ship is vertical a couple seconds later. It's like vertical flying straight up into the air. So I hope Finn either got inside real fast or he's got a really good handle on the outside.
Hmm.
Um, because that's not a safe journey.
I can't speak for that. I mean, I know we know he's alive, but
Yeah, yeah,
can you imagine that him flying away holding on? Lando, put it
yeah,
back.
yeah. Slow down. Okay. Well, we're running out of closing topics to talk about. We talked about the ending with all the Force voices. Don't know if we've brought up the sand, Tatooine, and a certain somebody burying some lightsabers.
Oh yeah, so the ending where Rey goes back to the Skywalker home because she wants to essentially bury Luke and Leia's lightsabers at his old home. I guess it's kind of a nice little burial thing. It makes me wonder how far away they were from Shmi. But yeah, so she buries these lightsabers, and then this random woman walks by, like, what in the world? Why is she out here? Trespasser. And she goes, like, who are you? And she sees like Luke and Leia's Force Ghost, and she's like, bro, I'm a Skywalker. And then everybody was like, the heck you are. And then dun 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 dun, um, it cuts to the credits. And so I wasn't a big fan of it. I don't think that was earned. I don't really. I mean, I know she's in a basically adopted Skywalker, like adopted into the family name kind of a thing.
Yeah,
And the fact that Rise of Skywalker was in reference to her, I don't really think that sat well with me either.
yeah. I'm in a similar camp. It didn't quite hit for me like I think they were hoping it would for the general audience, but um, I do see how it's just weird because she's like an adult, right? But she was waiting her whole life for her family that she thought she wanted, and she ended up finding a new family with the Resistance and with Finn and Poe and obviously Leia and Luke both had a great hand in that with at least some amount of training. Leia more than Luke, but um, yeah, she found a new family, so I guess from that side of things, um, she doesn't want to carry on the Palpatine name, so I get that as well. Um,
It makes me wonder what it's going to feel like with the new movie, like if because she's going to be training a new generation of Jedi.
right.
If, when they go to call her Master Skywalker, is that going to be cringy or is it going to be like, okay, I'm just going to accept it? You know, I just want her to be called Rey, but
Right.
that's not what they do when they say. Well, they called Qui-Gon Master Qui-Gon, so maybe they call her Master Rey, but I guess we'll have to wait and find out what choice they make.
Yeah. But Daisy Ridley, excuse me, she crushed it. Like you were saying, all the actors kind of came into their roles in this movie, but she was really good in this one for sure.
I have a weird thing for you guys to help me figure out. So the whole Palpatine's granddaughter thing, is really kind of weird to me, specifically the age difference. So I looked it up. Palpatine was born in 82 BBY, so before the Battle of Yavin, right? And then Rey was born 15 ABY, so after Battle of Yavin, which is a 97-year age gap, which would mean, roughly speaking, Palpatine had a kid around the age of 50, and then his kid had a kid around the age of 50, or something like that, because beyond 50, it's extremely rare to have children and stuff, at least in today's world. Star Wars world might be a little different. But then we have one of those flashbacks of her when her parents are being, separated or whatever, or her parents are about to be executed or whatever. A scene from her childhood where her parents are clearly not 50. And that's after she's born. So does that mean that Palpatine had a kid when he was like 70 or 80 years old?
His son was a defective clone. A clone that had no force powers, basically, and that would not suffice, for him to transfer his essence. Which is it's weird because like his son doesn't look like him, at least in my opinion, he doesn't. But that's essentially what he was. He just happened to get away from the situation, like not being executed or whatever, thrown in the trash.
Stuck in a lab.
Right. Okay. Weird. It makes me feel a little better. And thank you for not just saying it's explained in the books.
It kind of was, but
That's okay.
Sorry, I didn't know too much about that either, so or really anything about that.
so it says, so I looked it up real quick, like what word would you actually use for that? And Star Wars fandom calls it says the Emperor Palpatine's son was a strand cast clone from his genetic template.
Weird. Well, that was about all I got in terms of final thoughts. I could talk about this movie all day long, but at some point we got to wrap it up.
There's one more that Austin brought up during the break that we haven't touched on yet, and that is basically how in the world they slap Death Stars on the bottom of a Star Destroyer.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. Quite the advancement in technology.
Yeah. I mean the gun was huge.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. But it makes me wonder what the structure of that gun was. Like, did they find a crap ton of other kyber crystals? Because that's what powers the Death Star. But the beam was different. It wasn't green. So what is it actually made of? That's kind of what I wonder.
Yeah. Was the Star Killer base, was that like a green as well?
That was a
If I
red.
remember. Okay. So this is more similar to that then. Although that was pulling energy from the sun. So
Right.
Exegol is a pretty dark place.
Yeah. So I don't know where they got all that stuff from. I didn't read those books. Yeah, I can imagine that there's like one of those DK reader guide things that does like a breakdown of ships. Maybe they know.
Yeah. There's got to be an explanation out there somewhere. But
Could the Star Destroyers that they were using have been bigger than a standard one to be able to accommodate more of that equipment?
Maybe they didn't appear like when the resistant ships were flying around them, they didn't appear much bigger, but I can't say 100%.
yeah. I mean, I think it's certainly possible. And they could have all these other bells and whistles that we don't know about that, account for the big gun cannon on the bottom of them. So yeah, it seemed like when they targeted the guns, that pretty much took out the whole ship with the guns. So pretty much has to be linked to the ship's central, power system in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
So
Yeah, I think that's all of them. All the loose ends we had.
Yeah. All in all, really not that many based on, what pre episode 9 and post episode 9. I didn't know if we'd make it this far.
Yeah, I don't know. I look forward to the next one. But I mean, as far as this movie goes, I like it for what it is. It could have been better if it was properly treated. But I guess everything is just history now, and it's what we got. So that was our discussion on Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. If you enjoyed this type of video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We tend to have these come out on Wednesdays. We've got tons of them planned for you guys, so make sure to stick around and check out the new ones. We also got quite a few of them already on the channel, so if you're new with this video, check out the playlist. Drops a like if you like the video, and drops a comment letting us know your thoughts on the Rise of Skywalker. And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Didn't like the video, keep it to yourself.
Yeah, keep it simple.
Or constructive feedback's always welcome.
Absolutely.